Hello everyone. In today's lecture, we will discuss two important concepts in international economics, the balance of trade and the current account balance. Countries do not produce everything they consume, and they don't consume everything they produce. Instead, countries engage in international trade by buying and selling goods and services across borders. Because of these international transactions, economies need ways to measure how much a country exports, how much it imports, and how money flows between nations. So let's begin with the balance of trade. The balance of trade, sometimes called the trade balance, measures the difference between a nation's exports and imports. Previously, we discussed the GDP equations like GDP equals C plus I plus G plus net export, where X represent the exports and M represent imports. The term X minus M is called net exports, which is directly related to the balance of trade. If exports are greater than imports, the country has a trade surplus. On the other hand, if imports exceed exports, the, the country has a trade deficit. It is important to recognize that in modern high-income economies, services play a major role in economic activity. In many developed countries, services account for more than half of the total production, while goods account for less than half. Sometimes economies focus only on physical goods. This measure is called the merchandise trade balance, which excludes services and examines only imports and exports of goods. While the balance of trade focuses on exports and imports, economies often need a broader measure. This broader measure is called the current account balance. The current account balance includes not only trade in goods and services, but also income flows and international transfers of money. There are four major components. The first component is exports and imports of goods, which is the merchandise trade balance we discussed earlier. The second component is exports and imports of services. Examples include tourism, education, transportation, consulting, and financial services. The third component is income receipts and income payments. For example, if American investors own stocks or businesses overseas and earn profits, those earnings are counted as income receipts. Likewise, if foreign investors own assets in the United States and receive dividends, interest, or profits, those payments are counted as income payments flowing out of the country. The fourth component is unilateral transfers. These are payments sent abroad without receiving any direct goods or service in return. Examples include foreign aid, donations, and money that immigrants send to family members in other countries. When we add all together, we obtain the current account balance. All right, let's take a look at a practical example. We are given information about exports and imports measured in billions of dollars. The first step is to calculate the balance for goods. Exports equal $1,046 billion. Imports equal $1,562 billion. To calculate the merchandise trade balance, we subtract imports from exports. This produces a negative value of $516 billion. Because imports exceed exports, the country has a merchandise trade deficit of $516. At this stage, we only know the balance for goods. Next, we calculate the balance for services. Exports equal $509 billion. Imports equal $371 billion. Subtracting imports from exports gives $138 billion. This means the country has a service trade surplus of $138 billion. Notice that the country runs a deficit in goods but a surplus in services. This situation is common for many advanced economies, such as the United States, which often export substantial amount of financial, educational, technological, and professional services. Now let's calculate income payment. Income received by U.S. investors from foreign investment equals $561 million. Income received by foreign investors from investment in the United States equals $472 billion. Subtracting the two gives us $89 billion. This results in a positive income balance of $89 billion. This positive balance indicates that the domestic investors earn more income from foreign assets than foreign investors earn from domestic assets. Okay, the final component is unilateral transfers. In this example, the country sends $130 billion abroad through transfers such as foreign aid and remittances. Because money leaves the country and no goods or service is received in return, unilateral transfers are treated as a negative item. Therefore, the unilateral transfer balance equals negative $130 billion. Now we have all four components for the current account balance. So to find the current account balance, we simply add together all four balances, minus 516 plus 138 plus 89 minus 130. Therefore, the current account balance equals negative $419 billion. Because the value is negative, the country is experiencing a current account deficit. Although the country has surpluses in service and investment income, those surpluses were not large enough to offset the large trade deficit in goods and the negative unilateral transfers. As a result, the overall current account remained negative. This example demonstrates why economists look beyond merchandise trade alone when evaluating a country's international economic position. Now let's look at the historical data of the United States. In the graph, values above zero indicate surpluses, while values below zero indicate deficits. During the 1960s and much of the 1970s, the United States generally experienced small trade surpluses. Beginning in the 1980s, trade deficits started growing significantly. Several factors contributed to this trend, including globalization, increased international competition, changing consumer preferences, and rising imports. In 1991, the United States briefly recorded a small current account surplus. However, this was an exception. In the recent decades, the United States has consistently run large deficits in both the merchandise trade balance and the current account balance. This means that the United States has generally imported more goods, services, and resources than it has exported. Economists continue to debate the implication of these deficits. We'll see this debate later. Thanks for watching.